welcome everyone to our webinar today or tonight for those of you in the US. My name is Chris Ventura. I'm the CEO of Harness Projects. For those of you joining us for the first time, Harness Projects is an education provider teaching UX UI design skills. Our courses follow a real project learning model where our students work on live company challenges while we train them. We pride ourselves in being the only provider that helps students gain skills and experience all in the one course. So today we are joined by three of our leading industry mentors who guide students through our projects. They're here to share insights on what it takes to break into the UX UI industry. Now, we've had a ton of questions come through from all of you, and we're going to do our best to get to each of them during this webinar. Now, I've broken down the questions across 6 main categories that started to emerge, and this is going to cover the following. First, it'll all be about where to get started if you want to begin your journey into a UX UI career. Second, we'll look at the different career paths in UX UI and what skills are really critical. Third, we're going to look at how to build a standout portfolio to get you noticed. This is really important to be a UX designer. Fourth, we're going to explain why attaining real project experience should be a really key part of your job search strategy. Fifth, we'll look at interpersonal skills and networking and what role they play in the job search process. And finally, we're going to look at the end of the webinar what the future holds for UX UI, particularly with AI and other industry trends emerging. Cool. So to kick things off, I'd like to welcome our 3 panelists for the webinar, Warner, Alexis, and Molly. Welcome, guys. I've asked each of them to speak for a few moments just to introduce themselves, how they landed their first job in UX UI, as well as a short story about a recent hire that they've made to give you some insights into what real hiring managers are looking for. So first off, we'll start with you, Warner, from Canva. If you can take it away and give us your introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. So my name's Warner. I'm currently a senior UX researcher at Canva, based in Australia. So a bit about my background and my story. So I haven't always been in tech, like many people in tech haven't always been in tech. So a bit over a decade ago, I was actually an architect. The building sort. And, a lot of architects actually made a transition to tech. So it's not that unusual amongst a lot of kind of design-based careers. So I made that transition about a decade ago. I started by doing a boot camp. It wasn't Harness. Harness wasn't around back then, but it was a boot camp. And that's kind of like how I learned about kind of the foundational skills I needed. And it kind of went from there and landed my first job at an agency. So the way I landed that job was, there was a bit of luck involved, obviously. It was pretty good at that time, like tech was in high demand. And the way the bootcamp worked was very similar to Harness. It was real life projects, but there was only one project that was actually with a real client. So that's a big advantage that Harness provides, is that it gives you 3 free client projects, which is actually unusual compared to some of the other boot camps. So that real life client project was actually quite critical, because when I was interviewing with recruiters and hiring managers, that's generally the kind of case study that they'll hone in on, because that is, in all honesty, the most agencies or hiring managers generally aren't as interested in kind of hypothetical or like real projects.
Sorry,
Yeah,
mate.
sure.
Your connection's a bit stuttery.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
your bandwidth.
okay.
So we might have a look.
Yeah, maybe let someone else go and I'll try and fix up my internet.
Okay, thanks, mate.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Alexis, would you like to give us your introduction?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Alexis. Excited to be here to share my journey with you. So I spent the last 15 years working in design and digital teams across global and national brands in telecommunications, automotive, FMCG, insurance, and banking. My career path wasn't always a straight line into UX. I actually studied journalism, and my journey into UX started back in 2005, where I worked as a web designer, building websites for small businesses in parallel. And after university, I moved into digital advertising as a project manager. And at the time, UX wasn't a formal discipline, but I found myself creating wireframes and lo-fi prototypes while working with clients, visual designers, and tech teams then. This hands-on approach to UX stayed with me as I transitioned through different organizations. And then I later explored roles in digital product marketing, sales, and analytics at Bankwest and at HSBC. But even then, UX was always a part of my work, especially as I stepped into leadership roles in design strategy and team management. One of my most exciting opportunities came at HSBC when I helped to establish a design practice from the ground up, integrating design into project delivery. And the highlight of the experience was actually hiring a formal Harness project student as a UX researcher into my team. Her name was Emily, and I met her while mentoring a legal tech research project. And she stood out with her resourcefulness, presentation skills, and clear communication. And when a position opened up in my team, I encouraged her to apply, and the senior designers there were so impressed that they unanimously decided to hire her. She's still at HSBC today, even though I've since moved on to another workplace. So yeah, that's basically my career history. So I guess in terms of stepping into UX, the path is never really linear, I would say, but when it comes to problem solving day to day within your role, you can always definitely bring in the whole design thinking practice and framework into your work. And when you do feel like you want to pivot into this field of work, that's where you could put your hand up and start partnering with other teams and also do formal design studies to have a formal portfolio in place. And that's where you could apply for different roles within organizations and sort of have that exposure to venture into UX as a formal career.
Awesome. Thanks, Alexis, for that introduction. Super helpful. And I forgot about Emily. That's so good that she was able to find a role with you. I'm just going to add Warner back to the panel now. But Molly, would you like to take it away?
Of course. And then hello, everybody. My name is Molly. It's kind of excited to hear that we have mentors that are hiring the mentees. Hope I can get one soon. But without going too long, my background, I'm currently designing at Meta. I'm doing a lot of the privacy related stuff, helping the company to make sure their privacy is checked in place. And I have a lot to overlap and emphasize with both Alexis and Warner. And myself is also a fellow bootcamper. I had no formal educational training. And I heard UX design from my not coworker, during that time was my classmates who found a job, and I have the hardest time to find a job as international students in US. And then I somehow learned the term, and I couldn't afford another school to go through a 4-year program. And during that time, there was a boot camp that, near Chicago, which my school is nearby. So I just joined and started my career journey. And I've been in agency, I've been in, traditional industry, I've been in mid-sized company, big tech, and I've also co-founded a startup right before I joined Meta. It was a fun journey, and I'm happy to share later if we have any questions come up. So in terms of hiring, my first job. So after I finished my first bootcamp, I still couldn't find a job. And then I start interning sort of for free and gaining more experience, kind of like what Harness is doing, but instead of following a program, I have to do those all by myself. And after I gained a little bit of experience, I was able to start, putting my resume out and start have a portfolio. And then I found a job in agency and start doing a lot of varieties of work. Then all the way leading to Meta. And then in terms of hiring, I'm actually on 2 different roles in terms of hiring. I have been a hiring manager that hired my own team, and I have been a hiring, participant in hiring for Meta. Those processes are very different, but the overall, common denominator that I observe is it's not really necessary about where your education is from and, your background. I think those are helpful, but most importantly, it's your problem solving skills. And I believe we'll touch some of the questions later, but I'm happy to dive in when we get there, Chris.
Awesome. Thanks, Molly. Great. Well, Warner, do you want to take off from where you left off?
Yeah, can you hear me okay now? Is it still a bit stuttery, Chris?
Little bit, yeah. Let's see how we go.
Okay. Yeah, apologies about that. Yeah, where was I? So I did say that my first job was at an agency, fresh off the boot camp. And I think my portfolio did play a big part in terms of securing that first role, especially the real life client projects, because that seems to be what everyone was kind of honing in on and asking me questions about. But really, I think my architectural background did actually help a lot. Like surprisingly, I didn't think it would, but a lot of hiring managers were very curious about the skill sets that I got from my architecture world, not just the design skill sets, but also just a lot of the soft skills. Especially for a junior role, I feel like a lot of people underestimate how critical that is when you're entering the industry. Like they know you don't have as much real technical experience as their senior staff. It's not realistic. What they're looking for is all the soft skills, like for example, the project management skills, the stakeholder management skills that I had, the kind of like, natural sense of curiosity or empathy that you have, like for your work. And also it's kind of soft skills they can kind of like, kind of like, I guess, assess based on the interviews and just having those conversations with you. And so naturally, when it came to me hiring for people, so in a previous agency, I was actually hiring a lot of juniors. It's not the technical skill I'm most curious in. I mean, if they've got brilliant looking portfolios, that's a huge bonus. But at its core, I'm really looking at things like, do they have a natural sense of curiosity? Do they have natural empathy? Do they have problem solving skills, like Molly was alluding to? It's all those soft skills that actually become much more critical because if you think about it, the technical kind of design skills can still be taught at the end of the day, and they'll progress as they progress through, becoming a junior to a senior. Those soft skills are a lot harder to kind of like pick up and teach at a later part of someone's career. If someone's naturally curious, someone's naturally empathetic, that's just who they are. And if they have a curiosity into, digital design and technology, that's those are all kind of like taken into consideration. So I think for those of you who are a bit worried maybe about, oh, I don't have this background, that background, I'm not a, UX designer, and how do I break in? Those soft skills shouldn't be underestimated. Like because I definitely underestimated mine. But then due to some kind of feedback I got from some mentors I had, I really kind of like, I guess, emphasize that not just in my resume, but also in the portfolio work. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Great. Thanks, Warner, and thanks everyone for that intro. Super helpful to hear the diversity between your journeys into where you are today. So what we'll do now is we'll just jump into some of the great questions that were sent through to us. So we'll start at the beginning around how to, where do people begin if they want to get into this industry? And one of the first questions that we received a lot of was, do people need a design background to get into UX UI? And what are some typical fields that UX designers come from? Who would like to jump in there?
I don't mind jumping into that one. Yeah, so a story I was meant to tell in my intro, sorry, was a particular person, like a particular junior that we hired for, that comes kind of like from a background that is a bit definitely not design related. So this individual, she came from mining. So for those that don't know, Australia, mining is a big industry and there's lots of roles in mining. So she drove one of those massive trucks that, like transports the ore from one place to another. That was her job. But the thing that was very clear when she wanted to make the transition was all those soft skills that I mentioned, right? She just had a natural, like ability to be curious, to be empathetic. She was just naturally asking all these questions that a UX designer who was a lot more senior would be naturally asking. And not just that, but they naturally had a really kind of strong passion for design and technology. And that was really evident in terms of all the different hobbies that they had, in terms of all the kind of side, kind of like interests and side activities that they did. So there was just so much more to this person than, oh, they just worked at a mine. Like you put them next to like someone who's a graphic designer or who's someone like a visual background, it might seem weaker on paper, but once you speak to this person and dive deeper, just the soft skills, they're just so much stronger. And those things can't be taught. It's just who they are as a person. And they naturally excelled at our agency and they picked up things so quickly. Like I said, the technical design stuff, you do more of it, you're just going to pick it up. I think for juniors, there's this fixation, oh, I have to be this visual person, this all these skills in visual design. I have to have all that set up before I transition into UX. It's not, in my opinion, that's not necessarily the case. Of course, if you're a kick-ass visual designer, that's definitely going to help you. I'm not going to lie. But then for me as a junior, I feel like all these kind of softer skills, communication skills, they're a great communicator, probably communicated better than a lot of senior designers I've worked with. the natural empathy, the natural curiosity just made them so much better as a UX designer as they were progressing through their career. So I'll definitely say no, you do not have to have a design background to get into UX. And I think the story that I just told is like testament to that.
Awesome. Anything to add, guys, on that one? No?
Yeah, I echo Warren's sentiment that you don't actually have to have a formal design learning as a background to venture into this field.
Yeah. And just from our, experience of the number of students that have come through our program, I would say 40%, 30 to 40% might have a design background, and the rest don't have a design background. And we've seen some really great outcomes for some who haven't had that design background. And again, it's how they show up, how they curious they are about developing their skills in this space. Those softer skills are really important. And one of the things to be aware of is your soft skills are always developing through your life, right? And I think a project environment or an experience that you go through will help you put the spotlight on those soft skills much more than, say, a self-paced course or an online type of experience. It's really important to immerse yourself with others that are collaborating on a problem, trying to solve that problem, hitting constraints. That's when your resilience and your problem solving and your critical thinking comes to the forefront. So just something we try to encourage our students to think about when they're in our course. It's not just about learning the UX, it's about, honing those other skills as well. Now, do any of you have any resources or books or podcasts or things that you might recommend for people who are getting started in this industry?
I mean, I've definitely got some favorites for beginners because I still sometimes read them. I think all the designers will know these. There's the Design of Everyday Things, Don Norman, that's a very famous one. Don't Make Me Think, Steve Krug. I mean, these are just kind of Bibles. So that's a couple of book kind of recommendations. In terms of like, just if you want to get more hands-on with some courses instead of just reading things, IDF, so Interaction Design Foundation, they offer heaps of friendly, beginner-friendly UX courses, and Harness offers them too. Just as FYI, they offer them as part of the course. Nielsen Norman Group, so NNG articles. I'll say that's probably more the Bible. I always refer to the Nielsen Norman Group articles and the reports. There's just so much, information for both beginners as well as more seasoned practitioners in terms of anything to do with UX. So those are like just really foundational stuff I would recommend.
And then I have had students ask me a lot about visual design. I think it's a lot of people's hesitations if they're very new to the field. And a couple of things that I always tell people is visual design is about training your eyes as much as training your hands. Hands means you know how to use Figma, you know how to use those tools, but eyes is really hard to train. So I'd say see a lot of things. And if you ask where do you see things, of course, like the apps that you use every day, those are great resources. And if you want to look on some inspirations, I used to use Pinterest, not anymore, but there's a lot of useful information there. I think a couple of things like Dribble, Behance, those places people post a lot of their design. And the overall, I guess, theme that I'm trying to encourage people to do is just see a lot. And when you see a lot, there's going to be the repository that, building up in your mind. And next time you'll, when you do problem solving or you don't know where to put what, something just naturally come to your brain.
Thanks, Wong.
I would also actually recommend the book Lean UX by Jeff Gothel. It's just something to consider because even though you're starting out new in the industry, a lot of organizations are working in Agile. So it is handy when you don't come in just dogmatic about the design thinking approach, and also consider how you're working with different stakeholders and understanding delivery lifecycle as well. I think that part is sort of kind of missing in a lot of formal education or in boot camps. But boot camps do teach you to be resilient, and it teaches you to be resourceful and to be able to pivot when you are faced with constraints. So apply that thinking in workplaces when it comes to working with technology constraints or time constraints or budget constraints in an organization. So these are some of the key questions that might come up during interviews. So it's handy if you kind of understand the basic methodology of how teams work in organizations.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alexis. Thanks, everyone. So next point I want to go to is how would you describe the difference between UX, UI, and even product design? Because I think for someone starting out, it can be quite confusing to know which roles to apply for and what the differences are.
Coming from a really large organization, I'd say the three disciplines are all cut from the same cloth, and it really comes down to how the organization wants to frame it. In product design, you would find that designers partner very closely with product managers to deliver a design strategy and a roadmap. And the final product is really informed by users. Typically, when you have product designers, that's kind of how the organizations will be working. That's slightly higher design maturity. When you split out roles between UX and UI, then there's a fundamental difference in terms of people that are focusing on research roles into the how before coming up with solutions versus just working strictly on visual designs. Visual designs and UI typically is just maybe taking instructions from the product teams and just churning out screens. So it's slightly different in terms of that. But I do realize that more and more organizations are kind of merging the two roles together. They call it UX and UI designers. So there's a tendency to want to do both, but they might not have the maturity of embedding design practice with product management at the same time.
Thanks, Alexis. Molly.
This is a holy grail question. I've seen so many LinkedIn posts to debate about what is UI, what is UX, and what is, product design. That's why nowadays I just call myself either product designer or designer because I think in bigger organizations, when you have a lot of resources, you have specialty, right? People who are doing research are the researchers. People who are doing the design, they're doing the design. And maybe there are a couple team that are doing the branding, they're doing more visual, identity stuff. But overall, I think if we're talking about just general, industry, design is one function, and your job is to identify the problem and solve it from the user perspective that matches the business outcome. And that's your job. And you probably do it through designing the screens. You're probably doing it through design the service blueprint. So I'd say that it's important to know what each term means, but it's not important for you to identify, oh, I'm a UX designer, I'm a UI designer. I think more of a design problem solver is how I see, the true function of the design.
Thanks, Molly. Awesome. Very good points. Okay, so we're going to move to just career paths and skill sets in the next segment. I wanted to ask, what are some of the more in-demand UX UI roles that you're noticing? Because there are some variations, right? You've got research, you've got UI, you've got UX UI product. What are you guys seeing?
From what I've seen, I would say it's product design that's really in demand. And to kind of add to what Molly and Alexis was saying, I feel like product design, there's an argument about, what's UX, what's UI, and what's product. But product design, because at Canva, we only have product designers. There's no UX, UI designers. It's about end-to-end design. So whereas back in maybe 10 years ago when I started, UX designers weren't necessarily expected to do the UI polish, UI designers for that. Product designers are expected to be end-to-end designers. So that means doing the research, doing all the wireframing, doing the UI polish. And then to Alexis's point, they work very closely with PMs to understand the actual business needs. So you're designing for business needs, not just designing for visual looks. That seems to be the role that I'm seeing pop up again and again. There's still UX, UI roles and UX roles and UI roles, but I feel like product design is the one, at least in Australia, it might be different in the States, that I'm seeing pop up a lot. Because in this current economic climate, I think companies are realizing that they just want the unicorn if they can get it. And that's one person to do that end-to-end journey and be able to work with the engineers, work with the PMs, and work with key business stakeholders to translate business goals and needs into actual designs. So that's the role that I'm seeing a lot.
Thanks, Warner. That makes sense. Molly.
A new role that I didn't know before I joined Meta is the content designer. I used to work with people who help me to write copies and, to write emails sometimes, to just generally, writing words. But At Meta, we have a role called content designer. It's for people who design with their words, and it's a very powerful role, and especially when you do a lot of communications in terms of the social media. And I think a few years back, when the political climate is not, currently in as much severe in United States, there's a lot of roles in regards to accessibilities and, things that focus on inclusiveness. There's still a lot of roles like this. I think something, if you're interested in, you can look into that. Other than that, I agree with the point that Warner made. It's pretty general. People are looking for product designers, but there's still like special segmentations in terms of what specific skills they're looking for.
Thanks, Wong. Great. And look, one thought from my side is it makes sense that the shift is towards product design, particularly if product design is the full spectrum of research through to, the final UI product. And part of the reason is, and this is not 100% sure, but it just feels like it makes sense. The tools have gotten so much better at being efficient in terms of laying out your wireframes, building your prototypes, all the UI elements. Typically, that took a lot longer in some of the older versions of the tooling that this industry has used. And so you're freeing up some of that time to be able to then look at some of the other areas. And I think, as we get to the latest segment around AI and how that's influencing this world, I think it's really important for people to get across the commercial side of the design work and really understanding that the ROI and the impact of the design work that they're doing, because that's what sets you apart from someone who is very narrowly focused in just UI or research. So just a thought there. Okay, so there was a follow-up question. This is maybe related to what we just talked about, around those who are UX researchers or who have started in that space. Do you feel that they should be picking up design skills now to give themselves more job opportunities? Effectively, it was the question.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And that's something that even UXers like myself ask ourselves, right? Because there is a bit of that shift. I think it depends. I mean, don't do it if you don't like design, right? Because I know there's some UXers, they love research, and that's why they got into it. They love the behavioral psychology, and all that aspects, but don't like to pixel push. Then don't do it. I mean, don't pick up adjacent skills that you don't actually have a passion about, is my opinion, because there is still always going to be an opportunity to deep dive into research, especially in the strategic space. I think that's a huge opportunity that a lot of UXRs still maybe not fully capitalizing on, and that's something that AI can't touch just yet, maybe in 5, 10 years. But I know that there's UXRs such as myself who have that design background that actually like design. It makes sense. It's a no-brainer to, just kind of, extra security, for yourself to, pick up those design skills, because then you can, once again, to Chris's point, companies are looking to consolidate roles. They're not looking to specialize. In some areas, yes, like when it comes to AI, there's definitely going to be AI specialized roles, but there seems to be a trend to kind of consolidate the design roles, is kind of my point. Whereas 10 years ago, they were kind of specializing design roles like UX, UI, etc. So it would make sense for, especially if you're a junior UXR, to really kind of pick up those design skills if you actually have an interest in design. So that would be my take on it.
Great. Thanks, Warner. So next question is just around, just one for you, Alexis, I think. And for those industries outside of tech, is there still a strong need for UX UI designers? Obviously for tech, that's common understanding, but outside of the tech companies like Canva and Meta and others, what would you say is the demand for UX UI type of skills?
I'd say there's still a very high demand, because even in non-tech companies, they would still have platforms that are customer facing or internal facing. So the UX team that I'm currently leading at Macquarie Bank, we have several different platform teams, and you have anywhere between like 2 to 10 designers per team, just focusing on working on product design of the particular platform. So I'd say there is still a need in there. But to Warner's point, organizations are beginning to consolidate roles. There's no longer specializations where you might have a dedicated researcher versus a designer. They usually do come together in a single role. But one thing that we haven't touched on is service design. So for people that are researchers at heart, but might not be as interested in UI design, another role that we consider is actually in service design, looking at designing backstage and frontstage processes and customer touchpoints and overall user experience. So it's heavily leaned onto research and also strategy for that type of positions. Organizations.
Thanks, Alexis. Great. Okay. Are there any other related fields that you would say are great pivot points into UX UI? There were some examples asked in this question around graphic design or marketing or psychology. Any others, and do those resonate with you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. On graphic design, I mean, you already have a lot of skills in terms of how to do a layout, how to design visually. And marketing, you deal a lot with the users. How do people, the product market fit? Those are one of the, the most important questions when you design a product. And psychology, you already probably have the skills of doing research. The UXR is, I have so many coworkers that are transitioned from the psychology major to UXR design. That's a very common path. And even like writing, I think Alexis mentioned that she used to be in journalism. And if you don't want to be a product designer, you can be a content designer and use your word to design. And if you're, in the industrial field, and you're probably already familiar with the prototype, even just the concept of the prototype. I honestly believe anybody could be a designer in a way. And it's about either you're honing down to a skill and shape yourself into a specialty, or you add other skills and put yourself into a product designer, which in my opinion is more generalized term.
Thanks, Wong. Great points. So we're going to talk a little bit about portfolios next. Just generally, when you guys are looking at portfolios, what are some of the things that you look for when considering an applicant?
Yeah, I guess I can start. Yeah, there's a few things I look out for when it comes to portfolio. Look, one of the first things that they'll stand out is the visual design, right? It's, obviously not the most important, but it will make you stand out. If you create a portfolio, whether on a website or if it's even a PDF download, I would recommend website or do both. If it visually is well designed, in terms of not just like, oh, it's really like shiny and polished, but also just the layout. It's instantly telling me that this person knows what they're doing when it comes to laying out a page, right? So, everything's structured very, logically, all the spacing and all the kind of pixels are in the right place. That's definitely going to make you stand out next to a, portfolio that might have great content but looks like crap. Okay, so that's just fact, so it's going to help if it visually looks great. But then I always look at the storytelling of the portfolio, so meaning the case studies. So you absolutely have to have the case studies. Like I would say like anywhere from 3 to 5 is optimum for, case studies. That's generally anything more than 5, like people aren't going to read it. Anything less than 3 might not be enough. These case studies need to be well told. And there's generally a structure that, you've kind of follow in terms of the background, like the problem you're trying to solve. A lot of rookies, they make the mistake in portfolio case studies to just showcase the pretty stuff. Okay, and I've seen that a lot in like kind of student portfolios, and it's just like, oh, I just want to show all the really like pretty stuff that I made. If you're going for a pure UI role, that might be okay, but for a UX product design role, that is not okay, because like, where's the actual research? Where's the problem you're solving? What were the kind of results from the kind of, like the findings? How did you get to the design? How did you get to these pretty pictures? All that is far more important to me than the pretty pictures at the end of the day, especially for a junior role. Because it shows me your thinking and your thinking process, how you communicate on a particular page, how you tell a particular story, because it tells me all these different skill sets that, like your communication style, how well you empathize with users during the research. It tells me all these things. So I think that I would say the storytelling is just as important as how well it's visually designed. So those are the two things that will kind of immediately stand out to me when it comes to portfolios.
I think about portfolio is like your own marketing site. Find an example of a product you just love so much and look at their website, what attracted you, right? And you have to think yourself as a product when you think about your portfolio. And you have to think about your portfolio in the lens of design process. Who is your user? Which ultimately is first off, your user of your portfolio is actually the recruiter who are not a hiring manager. Those are different people. And a recruiter, they're probably not, specialized in design, but they've seen a lot of portfolio. So putting in the mindset of that and think about how to construct it. I agree a lot with Warner's point about storytelling and technical skills, but I think a lot of time people are missing is the emphasizing process, which is think about the user who is looking at your portfolio, what they're looking for, and think about the purpose of your portfolio. It's a marketing side. I mean, you can go on and on about your process. You can write a thesis about that. But is that what the marketing side is supposed to do? Or do you prefer an easy navigation, a good tagline, a beautiful visuals? Think about Apple, what they do when they sell an iPhone. And that's how you're supposed to do your portfolio. I know it's a like unrealistic standard to compare with Apple, but you aim high and there's an example.
For me, it's a middle ground between the two. Like basically what Molly and Warner has said, your portfolio is basically an elevator pitch of your skill set to showcase the breadth of your abilities. And what's capturing my attention personally as a hiring manager is your ability to frame the problem adequately, concisely. For me to capture my attention within like a minute, so I actually want to read on, because today you have so many applicants, and it's really challenging for hiring managers to get through all of them. So your ability to capture our attention right away succinctly and be able to tell the story of what you can do to solve problems will really get you quite far in terms of your portfolio.
Thanks, Alexis. Great points. I think that's a lot to take away there for those of you putting together your portfolio. And for those who are struggling to have a project to be able to articulate the process of their problem solving, a lot of what we do at Harness is to help students go through the full project process with a real client, with real users to do research with, that sort of thing. So that's one avenue, one option for you to get access to project experience. I wanted to ask you guys, aside from the portfolio, what helps someone stand out when they're applying for a role? What are some other tips? And there's obviously the resume, but are there other strategies that you've seen have worked well for people who've potentially applied for your roles?
Yeah, definitely. I'm sorry, you go.
So I think aside from that, I think agency is one of the things that makes you stand out the most. When I say agencies, it could be interpreted as you're, proactively reaching to your hiring manager. I say do research, find out who that person is, and you can do something in terms of the hiring and take agency there. And the other aspect of agency I would consider is how you talk about your project. I have seen project that is not real life project, but this person was like, I'm really passionate about, layout, and I wanted to teach people about UI. So I created this thing. I was like, great, show me about your process. So even if it's not a real life project, but it shows that you're actually taking the initiatives and the thinking through from the product standpoint. And that's the agency that I'm looking for. And the third one to make you stand out is to truly stand out, to not think like anybody else. You probably have certain process to follow. You probably read many, many articles about how to interview, but those are what your competitors are doing. Think about what you can do differently. So when I interview with a lot of, candidates, I'm looking for that person who doesn't give me the standard answer and who doesn't follow the process, but actually thinking about user and the business and keep those themes in mind. And those are the things can make you stand out.
Anything to add there, Warner or Alexis?
Yeah, I mean, Molly did say a lot of stuff I was going to say, but it's also being creative in how you do that, reaching out, because I was definitely going to say, yeah, those who show that initiative to reach out beyond just sending, oh, here's my resume and portfolio. It just shows so much initiative and that they're actually passionate about, getting the role, but just passionate about something in their lives. So one interesting kind of like tactic I've seen was that we got sent like a little video like just 2 minutes about that person and why we should hire them. It's 2 minutes. And that way we actually saw the person, we saw them speak, we got a gauge of that particular candidate. Because that's the thing about your portfolio to Alex's point earlier. They've only got a minute to kind of assess you. Should I get this, should I interview this person? A minute or two to make that first impression. If you send a 1 minute video, 2 minute video, that makes the job so much easier because then you're hearing this person, you're getting a sense of this person. You might go, you know what, I actually really like this person. I have to speak to this person. So it's about getting like being creative in terms of how you do these reach outs within reason. Like don't spam people on LinkedIn, but then just it's about competing with 100 other people to kind of get that interview so that you can get your foot in the door. So thinking creatively also definitely helps.
It's a great point about the video too. Alexis?
Yeah, so Molly and Warner covered it all, but just another tip when it comes to if you do get your foot into an interview, one tip for me is to have the ability to reflect and share what would you do differently for the project. Because quite often a lot of candidates just walk through the end-to-end design process, which is really a stock standard script because we all know the framework. But the ability to share what would you have done differently, and the ability, it shows your ability to reflect and think about how you will pivot for the next time. It shows learnability, resourcefulness. So that's how you would stand out essentially in interviews as well.
Right. Good points. Is there any tricks that people should be using with their resume, particularly with the number of AI scanning tools out there? Anything you've learned from your careers that could help people there?
I mean, there's one thing I tell all my students at Harness is it sounds like a pain, but to customize the resume to the job description. But with ChatGPT, there really is no excuse not to do that. Back in the day, there was no ChatGPT. It was a pain, like even just customizing a covering letter. But with ChatGPT, what I tell students to do, now, I don't know if this works 100% or not, but I find it makes sense. So you have the JD on the resume, and you pretty much just copy it in ChatGPT, and then you make sure that your resume hits all those points on the JD, right? Because it's going to look a lot better than some generic kind of resume that gets sent in that doesn't sound like it's actually addressing all the individual kind of bullet points in the JD. Because all JDs have bullet points, and it's really easy. It's just about copying and pasting that in ChatGPT, aligning that with your resume, and making sure that am I actually answering and addressing all the kind of asks from this particular JD. And that way, in a very short period of time, you're actually customizing each and every resume you're sending out to every single job. So that's just a bit of a tip that I give all my students.
Also, like not all recruiters are familiar with the industry, so the more keywords you're able to hit within the job description, the more likely you're able to be picked up by a recruiter, and so CV will land on your hiring manager's desk.
And I'd add, always lead with the results. If you have a quantifiable results, you increase conversion by 25%, put it there. And if you don't have a quantifiable results, use a qualitative one. You're making the navigations easier, you increase the, accessibilities, whatever that is, leading with the results, and drop the words about like collaboration team. I mean, not drop the word collaboration, but leading with the results rather than the things that you did, if that makes sense.
Right. And just a final one on this, I guess, interview application process. For the interview itself, for the first interview, what are some of the tips or things people should do to prepare for that interview? And also, if you can speak about design challenges that might be set for them in a second, third round.
The interview process, at least the one that I've been
Alexis, we might try a little closer to you. Yeah.
Yeah, so regarding the interview process, for the ones that I'm familiar with, it's usually coming prepared with 2 in-depth case studies that covers the breadth of your abilities. Hiring managers do understand that not all projects is going to cover end-to-end. So however you could highlight as much as possible within the case studies you're able to prepare would be really helpful so you can see the skills.
And do you bring in like a slide deck to go through the case study? Like what's the format of that explanation?
Typically people come in with a slide deck or or Figma link, thinking through the design process. What it is, it's again, I mentioned before, it's like an elevator pitch. So it has to be in a presentation style, and you're really just given 15 to 20 minutes to present. So it's very important that each slide you communicate with intention, and make sure you manage your time really well, to tell the story of the overall design challenge and process that you have to go through, as well as your final reflection piece. And then towards the end of the case study presentation, typically what we do is to unpack certain areas to understand your specific roles in the project itself. Because quite often hiring managers also understand that for design projects, you're never really working on it alone. You might work together with the cohort of other students. So it's very important to highlight which part of the project was a collaborative piece versus a solo venture into working on specific activities. This will highlight your ability to collaborate with other people, your ability to credit other people, and it really just showcases your ability to work with others, which is really important when it comes to hiring.
Excellent.
I can add one thing, which is make friends with your recruiter. For like people who isn't really familiar with the process, is there's two types of recruiters. In-house recruiter, they're the employees of the company. Their job is to hire the best talents, and their job is to hire the best talents, meaning they're there to look for you and they want you to get hired. The other type of recruiter are the professional recruiter the company hires that help them to find those people. And their job is also to help you get hired so they can get paid. So with all those being said, recruiter is on your side. So when you make friends with recruiters, you can get more insights in terms of the interview process, what the hiring manager is looking for, ask targeted questions of what is the hiring manager like? What are the specific things? And those are your user research. You need to do your treat this process also like a design process, and use your recruiter as a user and trying to gain as much insights that helps you to shape your interviews. So you can have more edges than people who didn't do that.
Excellent point. Thanks, Molly. Cool. Okay, so just moving on to a question more about something I'm very passionate about. Obviously, is real project learning. This is a methodology that we use when helping students move through our courses. I'd just like to go around the panel and get each of your perspectives on why that's been helpful for students to have to develop their career trajectory in UX.
Yeah, I don't mind starting. So with the real project stuff, I think it's pretty critical for any bootcamp. Without that, I think it's a pretty useless bootcamp, to be honest. It's mainly because it actually simulates, not just simulates, it actually is presenting real life constraints that you would actually encounter in the real world compared to a traditional learning style, like a hypothetical project even. Because in a hypothetical project, and I've seen that on portfolios, there's no actual real constraints that the people are putting on themselves, and no difficult stakeholders to deal with, no collaboration, but more the kind of like constraints. Whereas a real life kind of project, you're actually dealing with a real brief with a real stakeholder who has actual real needs, and meaning that they might be contradicting themselves, or they might be a difficult stakeholder, or they might be ambiguous in what they want. And that's very normal in the real world, is that we get ambiguous briefs all the time, and stakeholders that sometimes contradict what they want. And those are all real challenges that you as a designer have to overcome in terms of the stakeholder management and the soft skills, like we keep, pointing out. And without that, you're kind of missing a big part in terms of your learning and growth, because there's the technical aspect, which is, how do I become a better designer? How do I, move pixels better? How do I conduct research better? There's all of that, a lot of boot camps can, offer. But then having that real project experience to put the real life constraints and go, well, you actually can't do this, you can't do that. You've got this constraint, you've got this time constraint. Time constraint's another one. You know, a lot of these hypothetical projects I've seen in portfolios, I asked them, how long did you take on? They're like, oh, I don't know. It took me, I don't know, like 3-6 months. You know, there's no tangible kind of like limits on how they're doing these hypothetical projects. Whereas a real life project, you know, it's like boom, boom, boom. Each week they have to deliver certain kind of outputs and deliverables. And it's a very fast paced kind of learning environment, but that simulates the real world. And so that gives them a lot more of a taste of what it's actually like once they go out into the industry. And, you know, it just kind of toughens them up a little bit more. It definitely helped me, like when I was doing my bootcamp, is that the most essential project I did was the real life client project. You just like the others didn't even compare. And that's why I said the hiring managers were all focused on that particular case study and kind of ignoring the rest. And that's generally like what it is like, but people aren't interested in your hypothetical kind of fake projects, to be completely frank. So yeah, that's what I would say is the value or the key value.
Thanks, Warner. Molly, you just recently completed your project with us, mentoring your first project with us. How was that?
It was great. It was challenging, but it was great. We had typical issues with, you know, clients aims really high. Everything is a priority sort of situation, which happens all the time, big or small companies. And the students were having a lot of learning curves, which was expected, but a lot of valuable learnings. And they can put directly into their resume after accomplishing all the projects. And those are real projects. And there are like the clients was following up on the students' project, and there is a very high possibilities they're going to adopt it at a certain point, which you may be able to show in real life. I think that's the value of the real thing, that people can see something that is tangible. And I also want to talk an example of myself. I'm not addicted to bootcamp, but I did join multiple bootcamps because I believe I can accelerate a lot of learnings. So I become a designer by joining the design bootcamp. And a couple years ago, I was also thinking about data science. So I joined another bootcamp that teaches data science. And in that bootcamp, you don't really do real life projects. We do a lot of fake projects. And then see, like now I'm still a designer, not even remotely to become a data scientist. I think one thing is passion for design. I think it's just such a great thing to do. I love it. And the other thing is I just don't feel confident about the other subject because the lack of real world projects. So I mean, it's very personal. I think a lot of it is because of me, but I think to me, the real life constraint is the beauty of design. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to design anything, because if everything is possibilities, then we would just be going on forever and we don't even have to worry about ship it. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Molly. Alexis, you've been mentoring with us for a while, so what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's definitely I've really enjoyed mentoring with Hannes. I've done 7 projects to date so far. So definitely enjoyed, especially the social impact aspect of the projects that students get to solve for. That's always really rewarding. And it's also really great to see how students come from different backgrounds and experiences all come together to solve the same brief, but in a totally different perspective based on their life experience as well. So that is always very interesting to see, and it's also a good takeaway from a stakeholder's perspective too, when they have so many different considerations that they're thought about. Usually they come in with an ambiguous brief that we really have to unpack, or thinking that the problem is actually much smaller than it is. So for the students, it's always a challenging process, but I love to see how they can work through it with their resilience and get through the final process. I would always say that in these boot camps, I kind of position myself as, think of it, if it's in the real world, I would be a design or research lead, and I'm briefing the juniors in the team on like, this is something that we need to solve for, and we need to divide and conquer. Where would we collaborate together? Where would we go out and work on individual tasks? That's sort of like the mentality of real world projects and also collaborating with others with Hannes as a bootcamp. So I'd say take the bootcamp really seriously, like it's work, and definitely be engaged throughout the whole
Thanks, Alexis. Great points, everyone. But you know, one thing I've noticed, that we've been doing this for 7 years now, and an interesting thing happens with students on our projects, particularly when they're going through the double diamond design thinking process. In the first 3 to 4 weeks, particularly on our end-to-end UX project, which is called our UX fundamentals, students will go out and do research, and they're getting a lot of information from the client who they've interviewed, the users that they've interviewed, the course itself, the mentor, and it's this process of divergence before the convergence starts to happen. And a physiological response happens for a lot of people where it can feel overwhelming to a degree. But this is what problem solving is meant to feel like. And we try to encourage students to understand that if you're starting to feel that in your body, that's totally normal. And you need to follow the methodology, keep moving through the process, and you'll find that all of that information will start to crystallize into a direction, and your mentor's there to support you and help you move forward towards that point. And, I've had students that we've had to speak to at that point in time in their journey, and then speak to them again after the final presentations, and they're like, I can't believe I was freaking out so much, and was considering whether this was right for me or the right approach. And what ended up happening was that the fulfillment they received at the end from going through that personal development around how it feels to be uncomfortable in ambiguity, it's really what a designer does really well. And so, if you're going to go into this career path, I think getting comfortable with that uncomfortability is really something I would encourage. And that's an example of how a behavioral skill like resilience is formed in a project environment. So there's an education happening underneath the surface. And the more you're aware of that, I think the more you'll get out of a program like ours or others. Okay, so let's jump to the next set of questions here. We've spoken about how real projects can help a portfolio stand out, so I don't know if we have anything else to cover there. Let's talk a little bit about networking as part of the job search process. What are some advice that you all have around networking and, leveraging your own network to help your transition into this career?
I would say go to as many design meetups as possible. Talk to other designers that are in the industry, and get to know what they do. Ask them a lot of questions about their career to sort of form an impression, so they know that you're interested in them. And then when an opportunity comes up, and do reach out to them via LinkedIn, as Molly has want to mention, the key difference is your ability to be proactive in the job search. Reach out to them and talk to them afterwards, and you're likely to get hit rather than passive about it. So my tip is to go to as many design meetups as possible.
I would say don't underestimate the power of being liked by people. And in saying that, I'm not saying you got to be a bootlicker and suck up to every hiring manager that you see. That's not what I mean. It's more like, I find personally, I could be wrong, but us as designers, naturally, we're quite introverted individuals, which is how we are. We're not those sales type that are naturally extroverted. So it's not the most natural thing for us to go to a meetup and just go talk to half the room, but you have to do it. You just have to get out of your shell. And to Alexis' point, go to all the meetups, not just the meetups, even conferences, this and that. Get out of your shell and actually speak to people, because at the end of the day, if there's like two candidates and I've met one at a meetup and I had a conversation with them, I saw their face, and I kind of met them as a person versus one that's just a resume, I'm going to hire the person, not the resume, if that makes sense, right? And, you're just increasing your opportunities and increasing your probabilities of these kind of like, there's magic happening by, going to these meetups. I found my first job, I didn't mention this, I found my first job at a meetup, because the managing director of the agency that hired me, he used to be an ex-architect, and there was just that instant rapport. Okay, you're trying to, build these rapport. I didn't know that I was going to meet this person at the meetup. It was just because I put myself out there, and I hate going to meetups. And so it's just one of those things that, even though it's uncomfortable, I understand for a lot of people who come from a design background, that you just have to get out of your shell and just kind of push yourself to do it. Like to Chris's point, like when you're uncomfortable, that's when you're growing. Okay, and I completely agree with that. And I knew, I hated public speaking. I didn't like speaking to strangers, but now I'm pretty comfortable doing that because I forced myself to do it, and you grow. And so I think it's just one of those skills that you're just going to have to develop no matter how shy you are or how introverted you are, because the person who's doing that is going to be at a massive advantage compared to the ones who aren't.
I really admire that, Warner. I don't know how you do it. I'm extremely awkward in terms of those meetups, because I'm not really good at it, like relationship building in the surface level. I'm the type of person that I like to, build deep relationship, which usually those like networking thing is very difficult to do that. But how I view those things is kind of, if we use an inappropriate analogy, is dating. You swipe left and right and go to the meetups, you show your face. But in order to really get a date, you have to work. You have to do a lot of follow-ups, afterwards. And I think I don't do a lot of network as guilty, as charged. But when I do network, I focus a lot on one individual, instead of going on the numbers game, which I probably are taking the wrong approach. I'm not sure, but that's how I do. I go with one person. I really trying to, find the right fit. And then I would trying to offer something that, that seems to be valuable to the other person. And don't think of yourself as no value to offer. If you're a beginner, you actually have a lot of values. First of all, your fresh perspective and in the inclination of another human to connect with you. And also, a lot of the designers they really like teaching people. They really like mentoring, and find a free mentor, and those people will open door for you. If you're the type of person that you're, really good at networking, I'd say play with numbers game. If you're just like me and you're really awkward, I'd say spend a lot of time on finding the right fit and search for that one or two individuals and build a deep relationship there. I think that could help. Lastly, referrals. I'm not sure if we're going to talk about that, but a lot of companies hire people internally through referrals, and your resume is going to be way much more, valuable and easy to access if you're referred by somebody. And people getting referrals, they're actually getting paid to get a lot of companies. So if you have a job in those, big fans or big tech that, you want to apply, if you like to network, find somebody who work those companies and just ask for referrals. Sometimes, it works because people who refer you, if you're getting hired, they're also getting paid. So it's kind of like a win-win situation.
Great point on the referrals, Alexis.
On the topic of networking, so I myself is also an introvert and I don't really like talking to a lot of people, but my tip is that a lot of designers are great at listeners. So consider what are some good opening lines to ask people questions about themselves, so they spend time talking about themselves. So what you're doing then is you're just practicing active listening and getting to know someone, and in return they would ask you about yourself, and that's how you get to know people in networking events. So it's just a tip there, if you're feeling really anxious about it. And another one is bring a friend. Your friend is always your support to talk to you. And I do find that when you're talking to a large group of people, when you do have a friend there, it's just looking at you, acknowledging and nodding in terms of what you're saying. If you're fearing that, people are not listening, that visual confirmation of and validation of what you're saying kind of gives you confidence to be a little bit more open as well. So those are some tips for the introverts out there if you're fearful of networking.
Great, thanks everyone. Okay, and just further to this around interpersonal skills and in relation to networking, but also the job search, if we had to sort of highlight the top 3 interpersonal skills that if someone was like, I need to go and develop these, what would be your suggestion there?
Sorry, I just cut out there a bit, Chris. I missed the question. Was that directed at me?
Anyone who'd like to take it. This is just around interpersonal skills. If there was like a top 3 set of interpersonal skills that if someone was like, I need to get better at these or hone them, which direction would you point them?
My number one thing is communicate with intention. People these days don't really have a lot of time. So especially when you're talking to a potential employer or hiring manager, we want to know that you can communicate succinctly, and also the ability to be flexible and adapt to change. These are like the top 3 things that we would look for when it comes to interpersonal skills.
Very good. Awesome. I like that. Molly?
I want to say communication, but Alexis already stole my answer. But now I think about it, it's not. I think the communication skills coming from a mindset. Like I think that probably would be where I feel like if I were new to the space, or anybody that I've seen in the past are new to the space, is the mindset change. I mean, you may have, everybody have their baselines. You have your own style of communicating, but I think have the mindset switch of solving problems through the design perspective is going to help you navigate a lot of the conversations. For example, you probably, in the past, you're not good at presenting your work. You're really worried about, public speaking. And how do you change that? You can't really change any of that because you just have a stage fright. What do? I think in those cases is to change the mindset from I'm presenting to, I'm educating. I don't know, I'm selling, or, I'm explaining, or I'm representing. You're representing the users, you're selling your idea, change your mindset from the common fare to the advantage of being a designer, and it's through the design mindset. And in terms of feedback, another example, like I don't like critical feedback, and I hate when people say my job sucks. Like, everybody hates when people critiquing their work. But if you switch to the design mindset, those are feedback not to you, but to the product that helps you to improving. And the specific mindset change is design process is continuous iterative, and you have to iterate. How do you iterate? You iterate based on the feedback. So in that case, it's not that, my job is pretty good, I don't like the feedback. It's more about I'm using those feedback to improve and do a better job. So yeah, I think a lot of those interpersonal skills, it's hard to pinpoint because everybody have a different baseline. But if you want to be a designer, I think you have to embed that process into everything that you do, specifically your mindset.
Awesome. Thanks, Molly. Warner?
Yeah, I mean, Molly and Alexis kind of said a lot already, but I do have to reiterate what Alexis kind of mentioned before about the active listening, and that is a natural, I think, skill set that a lot of designers have and should definitely leverage. So it's about, if you feel like, public speaking, connecting with people are not your strengths, then leverage your strengths. So what are you good at? So, and I know for a fact that a lot of designers and introverted types are great active listeners. So it's about kind of switching it around and go, not focus on what you're bad at, but then focus on what you're actually good at. I find that actually is very helpful just to kind of build confidence, because at some point you're going to do something that, you might not execute it 100% perfectly. And as designers, I've also noticed that we're all perfectionists by nature. So if we don't get something absolutely perfect, we get anxious, we get upset at ourselves, and we blame ourselves. That's something that I've just kind of realized about myself and also a lot of designers. Whereas if you focus on, well, I'm actually good at this, I'm going to lean on that, like the active listening, then it actually kind of helps, give you a more healthy mindset about just yourself, and it helps manage that anxiety when it's time to actually do that uncomfortable thing, if that makes sense. So that's typically something I always kind of lean on before I have to do something I don't want to do, or I feel uncomfortable doing, is to kind of reassure yourself, but you're good at this, and you're good at this, and you're good at that, and you've got this. So it's kind of like reassuring yourself, just, emotionally, psychologically, to kind of do that uncomfortable thing is a trick that I've learned. Just, it's a very personal thing, obviously, that I find helps me a lot. Yeah, so.
Thanks, Warner. That's great. Only thing to add, I guess, is little baby step practicing on your journey to your ultimate interpersonal capability, right? So if it's presenting skills that you really struggle with, present in front of the mirror, and then present in front of your friends, and then present in front of your family, and present in front of a small meetup, and build your capacity to present into larger and larger groups of people with less and less knowledge of who they are, right? Because that will just make it more of a challenge each time. And so build yourself towards the capacity to just speak confidently in front of 1,000 people. I mean, if that's your goal, or if your goal is really just to speak to strangers and to people in a networking event, start with, maybe people in your social circle that you don't usually have a lot of dialogue with, and you want to start there and eventually do that in more unknown territory. So yeah, those are some other things just about honing the muscle. I think a lot of the interpersonal stuff is really just a muscle that we either use or we don't. And if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So that would be my suggestion. Just on LinkedIn specifically, we had a question about how do you use LinkedIn for networking or even just for making these connections? It's a tricky one, right? Because I know each of you will probably get a lot of LinkedIn reach out that is of a lower quality. I know I do. People trying to sell me things, people trying to promote things. So I just wonder what your suggestion would be there.
Look, I'm guilty, first of all. I'm not really being as active on LinkedIn as I should. So, like take my advice with a grain of salt. But when I have seen it done well, especially from juniors and like kind of at that grad level, and not saying you have to do this, but they actually start building their own presence on LinkedIn and actually treating it like what it should be, which is the professional social media network. Some people hate LinkedIn, some people love it, but whether you love it or hate it, we're stuck with it. So you have to work around that ecosystem, right? And so what these people have done is actually fully embrace the fact that, yeah, this is my online presence from a professional perspective. So what they'll do is they'll, like obviously make sure their profile is all polished, but then start, writing articles, having opinions, writing comments on, like a more well-known kind of industry experts. So they're really getting involved in that social media aspect of it. So when they do those reach outs to people they're interested in connecting with, they don't seem like some dodgy person from some other country that just wants to get a job, right? They seem a lot more authentic. They seem a lot more kind of like genuine. And there's topics that they connect with. So when I kind of give advice to my students is don't just reach out cold to go, hey, I want a job at X. It's just not going to work. It's usually when someone's maybe posted an article or posted a comment that you kind of lean into that as something that you can have rapport with. It's like, hey, by the way, I saw your article or comment on this. I really, really like am passionate in this space, da da da. So it's like a bit of an icebreaker and an entry point, and it's a lot less awkward. But by having that online presence, they might look at your profile and go, oh, actually, this person is legitimately interested in AI or in this space or that space. So it just makes it a lot more palatable for the people you're reaching out to. If you have that kind of stronger online presence. But then, like I said, I'm guilty of not having an online presence on LinkedIn because I don't like social media. But I have seen it done well. So, that would be my 2 cents.
Thanks, Warren. Anything to add there? Or?
Yeah, I think it's also adding on to that, it's curating who you're following as well, what companies and what other networking sites such as ADP list and Medium, things like that you're actually following and contributing to. That's really important. So we know that you actually have an active interest in the topic and you're not just some stranger. I guess the other thing is that make sure that your profile picture and your overall profile looks professional. There have been times where like I would look at a profile and it just looks like another social media website, like from Facebook or something. Like you have to create like a professional profile there. You have generative AI now. If you need to make yourself look smarter, do that.
Absolutely, yeah. It has to be a different type of persona then. So anything to add, Molly?
I think Warner and Alexis covered everything. And I particularly, I guess, agree with the social media aspect of it. Some of the people that I know, they become a social influencer on LinkedIn, and they are now, giving up their 9 to 5, and they're having a lot of clients. I'm kind of jelly in that case. And they actually spend a lot of time on posting and engaging. I think if you wanted to, really use LinkedIn as your main source for network, getting people's eye is important. Start commenting. If you don't have anything to say, start liking. When you like and comment more on one of the influential people and send an invite and connect with them, bang, your network, then start chatting. Maybe some of the days they'll give you a job opportunity or something like that. So I would say treating LinkedIn as what LinkedIn truly is. It's a social media.
Thanks, Molly. Okay. And just around recruitment agencies, obviously someone asked, should we be using them? I imagine there's no reason not to, but are there any other things to be aware of with recruitment agencies compared to direct to hiring manager applications?
You mean as a applicant to recruitment agency?
Correct. Yeah. If you are, trying to get exposure to more available roles.
Got it. Well, there's no harm of signing up with agencies. They have a lot of jobs that, maybe later to the market or not open to the market, and they can find you, and you don't have to pay them a thing. So I've started with some of the, like I signed up with some of the design agencies, not design agencies, sorry, recruitment agencies back then when I first started jobs. And then I didn't really get a good roles from them, but they do send you roles. And I think it was just not a good fit for me. But I've known people that, finding roles through them. But I'd say don't solely rely on the recruitment agency. You should be doing your own outreach. You should actively apply. And more importantly, you should apply with intention and finding the right person to connect, not just, randomly sending resume and they won't see it. So use the agency, but also actively with agency and looking for your jobs.
Thanks, Molly. Cool.
Yeah, just expanding on that, a lot of large corporations, not tech, they do actually have contracts with agencies. So quite often, sometimes hiring managers would just set a certain criteria for juniors or midweights to these agencies, and then they would send us the resumes of these people, and they work through contracts through them. So definitely hit up both agencies as well as directly apply in organizations too.
Okay. So let's now go to the last topic of the evening. We're going to talk about AI, UX trends, industry trends. So the big question is, how are you seeing AI impact UX, UI work and roles? And is it happening in your organizations?
In terms of sorry,
No, you can go. You go first.
Yeah, in terms of AI, I see it play a big role in terms of research synthesis. So we have a lot of research tools in our organizations these days, and what we tend to do is like we would download the interview scripts or the interview transcripts, and we'll upload it to a platform, and it will just spit out all the insights for us. So when it comes to research activities, the speed to gather your thematics is a lot quicker now when it comes to using AI. So I don't see AI replacing design roles. I see AI speeding up the work that we can do for organizations. That's part of the role within AI today. But I also do say take it with a grain of salt, because like we do use say smart chapters in Zoom for our interviews today. And what I do realize is that AI tend to miss a lot of the nuances. So there is that need for people to still go in there and read through the transcripts and color in and add richer insights. So don't get lazy just because AI is available.
Yeah, absolutely. Warner?
Yeah, so my favorite topic, AI. Yeah, at Canva, definitely we are using AI heavily in our day-to-day job. Even just personally, I use AI all the time. To Alexis' point, she kind of touched on the research synthesis thing. I don't use it to synthesize. I'll kind of counter that point. I use it for initial kind of like just kind of trawl through data, but then I still feel like you need that human researcher to kind of actually pull out the insights you need. That's something that AI is not quite there yet. So like you said, Alexa, there's nuances that it kind of misses out on. But I know Canva's got this mandate of increasing efficiency by X percentage using AI, and it's quite significant. So they are definitely taking it very seriously across all, not just research, but all designers are expected to kind of use it. All the PMs are expected to use it to kind of speed up and augment their jobs. And that's kind of the key here, right? Because there's a massive fear. I understand that AI is going to take everyone's jobs. But what I personally think is going to happen in the short to medium term is that the designers that use AI to augment their roles are going to get the jobs compared to the designers who ignore AI. Okay, so that's my thinking on it. So you definitely need to be picking up these AI kind of tools and learn how to augment that and improve your efficiency. Because I can just see in a few years' time there's gonna be roles for AI, focused designers, AI focused researchers, and it's already starting to happen because it does increase efficiency, especially for a lot of the kind of like grindy kind of work, like analyzing large sets of data, and even like there's tools like Figma's doing it now to just create wireframes and just from prompts. So even in the design space, like the execution side of design is gonna slowly, if not quickly, be overtaken by AI. So there's a bit of a threat there. That's why I would recommend that if you're kind of coming into the industry, you need to think beyond that and go, well, it has to be on a strategic level that I have to add value then, not just at an execution level. So that's where I see the kind of threat of AI is more in the execution part. So if you're going to just be a pure UI designer, I would be worried. Just my opinion. That might not exist in 5 years. But then with the strategic thinking, with the kind of deeper research, with the kind of deeper kind of like thinking, AI is not quite there yet in 5 years anyway. So that's where I would be focusing. But yeah, that's my take.
Thanks, Wong.
I think so for AI, that's how I vision it is it's going to be something that we can avoid in the future. And it's going to shape a lot of, trend of design in the future. And how would that influence how does that influence you as a designer? I think just as any topic, you need to deeply understand how it works in order to design something that interacts really well with humans. So I think a lot of trends that I'm seeing people is using the outcome of the design rather than really understand the modality of using the outcome of AI rather than really understand the modality of AI. And you're the designer who is going to shape how AI interacts with humans, understand it deeply. How does the recommendation system works? How does the algorithm works and why certain AI would generate X, Y, and Z. And in that case, you'll be able to master, using the AI rather than just its outcome, but also using it as a technology to support your work.
Great points. And I guess looking forward over the next 5 years, what do we see for this industry? What are we seeing for? I mean, this is 5 years is probably too long, particularly now to forecast anything, but maybe 3 years. What are you guys seeing?
I mean, in the context of the impact that AI is going to have?
I guess AI being one aspect of it, potentially. I mean, what was interesting in your response before, Warner, was that Canva actually have a KPI on efficiency that they're aiming for. So that says a lot to me about what some of the larger tech firms are doing. I'd be curious if Alexis at Macquarie, different type of firm, also large, do they have a similar type of mentality?
Yes, definitely. We have our own version of AI, internal AI that we use at work to drive efficiency in our day-to-day. So as an example, if you're a manager, you could quickly use AI to help you write all your performance reviews. Granted that you put in all the appropriate inputs, you can't just write from scratch for you. There's also using AI to help you with UX copywriting as well, because quite often we get marketing or tone of voice giving us beautiful copy, very creative writing, but how do you then synthesize it down to functional UX copy that it's really concise? So we use AI to help that out today as well. So there's definitely a need to drive efficiency within organizations with the adoption of AI. We also use it in the customer service space as well. So more and more organizations are tapping into AI beyond just using a bot to chat people, but using AI to actually find thematics of what voice of customer surveys are actually saying about the organization as well, and then giving us recommendations on next steps. So if you're in a research role, it's actually really important that you're familiar with using AI, as well as looking into any other analytics and voice of customer tools that would use AI to give you and inform the research outcome.
Thanks, Alexis. That's great. Molly, any points on that future? I mean, Meta, obviously they're one of the bigger players in developing open source AI LLMs. So very curious to hear your thoughts.
how does it shape the future?
Yeah.
Is that
What's the, inner conversations happening at Meta about, where the future of work goes in the next 3 years?
um I can talk a little bit about my how does it already shape my work. So uh, I'm already working on a lot of projects that relates to using AI to improve the efficiencies. And I work on some of the internal tools at Meta, and not only that we are actually, using AI different models to trying to generate better results and remove the human work and improve the accuracy of the internal tools if it's for, let's say, monitoring certain process or approving or denying certain projects, stuff like that. So as a designer, I already need to understand a lot of the process that AI has replaced and also like how it works exactly, because there's different type of models that work together, may give you a different results, stuff like that. It may not necessarily impact the interface, but it definitely impact the workflow. So with that being said, I think design, previously we talked about the UX, UI, and the product design. So this is a little bit less on the UI, but a lot on the flow, a lot on the products. And Alexis mentioned about service design. I can imagine AI being used so much in the service design in the future to optimize the workflow and to discover redundancies and stuff like that. So I go back to my previous point, really understand what this thing is and how it works. And I love using AI in many of the cases. I use AI already writing for a lot of my content. I love it. But more importantly, I now use AI to argue with myself, to reason. I don't know if Warner and Alexis and Chris, do you guys, when you design, you argue with yourself a lot? I do that all the time. There's 10 whys in for every questions, and I'm so tired of it, doing it with myself. And having an AI to reason with me and, keep asking why and why helps me improve a lot of my decision making too.
Thanks, Molly. That's super helpful. Okay, and I think that's pretty much one other point, just around AR and VR. It's been a little while since we've spoken about that technology trend. Curious to know, I guess that's more another question for you, Molly, given Meta has done a lot in that space. Are you seeing any expansions of UX UI, people moving into designing for 3D spaces and that sort of world?
Definitely. I mean, I think 3D has been a thing for the longest time. It's just there's never a good device or, accessible device for people. So it's been very hard. Now with broader adoption of AR, VR, and even just, 3D AR, VR in your 2D, device, it happens a lot. And personally, I think the beauty of 3D is it's the spatial, right? It's the hectic that you're not just designing a 2D interface that you determine people's, I guess, 2 sense, your eyes, your hearing, maybe 3 sense and your touch. But with the 3D, you're designing more sense. And to me, it's a very complicated but exciting, opportunities for designer to think about multiple different dimensions. And at the same time, I think how to design 3D. The 3D used to be so hard to design with the old software. I remember I used to spend hours just trying to learn how to make a leg in Cinema 4D. But now, like, you have things like Blender, you have easier tools to help you to build a model, stuff like that. I think as designer, you always want to increase your capacity of designing for different objects, designing for different devices. And that's how you keep yourself ahead of the game. So don't be afraid, tap into it. And I think AR, VR, although not as big as AI at the current moment, but it's not going anywhere. And we're only going to demand more senses as human being naturally wants to experience more. So I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna learn more about 3D. And I don't know about you all, but I encourage you to do it and share your resources with me if you are.
Awesome. Great. Thanks. Any other final comments from the panel? Maybe topics that you wanted to talk about we didn't get a chance to?
Yeah, I mean, just some parting thoughts. I think, like with this whole future-proofing your career kind of topic, With design, I just really feel like AI is going to be a game changer in the execution kind of side of things. So don't just think from the terms of visuals. So you got to expand your thinking, like so into AI, but things like even product strategy, emerging interfaces, and you got to always just stay nimble. I think be adaptable. Like it might not be called UX UI in 5 years, but then the underlying skill sets are still going to be the same. So you just got to kind of evolve as new tech like AI and VR AI comes along. But at a foundational level, like there's going to be a lot of those skill sets, soft skills, hard skills that are still going to be relevant. So just kind of keep that in mind is what I'll say.
I saw some questions in regards to getting a master in UX versus like, is it worth it? I think it depends on your goals. What's your education goal? Is that to get a job, or is that you want to dive really deep in certain, topics regarding to the design? Because the master is more academic than applicable. And of course, you're learning a lot of real life skills, but you're learning very like deep into one topic, and hopefully, I think going to the master, you're trying to develop some sort of the theory that is new to you, rather than just learning it. So it depends on your goals. If your goal is to get a job, I would say like really understanding what a master degree has to offer versus the bootcamp with a real project. But if your interest is, I really wanted to dive into one design theory and I really want to go through academia, I think master could be a good option. And really waiting out, I guess, what your ultimate goal. Education is just education. And you can learn all of those things actually from YouTube, but your time, that's the most important thing, and value your time and how do you spend that more efficiently.
Well, great points. Alexis, any final comments?
Yeah, so for me, I think is expand your thinking in terms of what you need to learn beyond just a set of like design tools and capability. Think about what additional skills will also complement those skills as well. So for a lot of designers, especially if you go into big corporations, don't wait on other teams to provide you with the information. If you have the ability to learn how to self-serve data, that's really handy because suddenly you can produce work at a much faster pace rather than wait on another team to support you on that. And then also think about how you're able to pivot and gather information as quickly as possible rather than getting told no or for a certain approach. Think about how you could seek feedback from others as part of your project or as part of your learning network. So yeah, consider other skills beyond just design. So analytic skills, understanding data points that would actually matter to organizations, such as NPS scores, and also conversion rate optimizations. Digital marketing terminologies are also very important for designers to learn in terms of how to actually communicate to their stakeholders and what are the measurable impacts to the business forward.
Thanks, Alexis, and great points to end on. And we are out of time, everyone. So I want to give a big thank you to Molly, Alexis, and Warner for taking the time to go through all those questions with us. We will do more of these. I hope it was helpful and there was some insights for you all. And yeah, it was great to see all the comments coming through as well. We're always happy to chat to you one-on-one. I know there are some questions that maybe we didn't get to. Our door is always open. So even if you're not considering a course right now, just book a time with one of our team members and we'll have a chat to you about your career goals and see what the right path might be for you. So that's the best way we can get to all the other questions that you might have had. So with that said, thank you, everyone. We'll see you at the next one. And yeah, have a great day or evening.